Hello everyone, this is Arcane AI Cinema Tutorials. This is the first one I'm going to do. Basically I'm just going to show you the process of how I've created the things I create on this channel, and I mostly utilize ComfyUI as at least the starting point to doing this. And I wanted to do this in a way that I think a lot of people don't do this, is by, instead of just giving you a bunch of workflows, show you how to really utilize this thing to make your own stuff. So that way it's not like I have to have this starting point, this workflow to figure out how to do this. It's not that complicated, but it just takes knowing what these things do, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna show you this process from square one, so that way it's not a mystery. So I'm gonna try to do it in the least technical way possible, but more importantly than that, I'm gonna try to be as to the point as possible. So first things first, double click on the freaking thing in the background, type in KS, you'll see KS or K sampler. Just click on that, because that's the first thing we're going to use, because this by far is the most important part in my opinion. I think really anybody else's opinion, to really understanding how this thing works. Start from here, because this is like the brain of the entire process. And I say the brain because this is what makes the decisions about what it's going to look like, whether or not it shows up right, blah, 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 blah. So basically, let's just go through these parameters really quickly to really talk about what it is everything's doing. The seed is like a unique identifier or number that you start with to generate the image. This number is basically like producing like random sets of noise on the image, and we'll talk more about that when we get down to this last one, denoise. Because I think that's very important, that I think that most people don't even talk about. It's a random number that you start with to generate this kind of noise. Yeah, as it says, random seed used for creating the noise. Control after generate. Basically, after you generate your first image or set of images utilizing this number will change, the seed number will change to something randomly different. Who knows what it might be. You can also change this parameter to be a fixed, so it doesn't change at all. So you have the same base every freaking time, the same base amount of noise, or same base type of noise, I guess you could say. Increment is, it increases by 1. Decrement does exactly the opposite, decreases by 1. And of course, where it's already on, randomize, it turns into some random long freaking number. And then the next one is steps. Steps is basically how many pass-throughs it does of generating the image from the noise, right? Which is what they call denoising. That's why they call it that. And again, we'll talk about what that is when we get down to the end. But the amount of steps will change depending on what sampler you use, or what, which again, I hate having to skip because it's like that, but that's, I don't want to skip to the next step, but that's basically what that is. If you use a bunch of steps, it can get crazy, ridiculously like bad. If you use too little steps, it doesn't really get refined enough that the image really comes out. But it just depends on what you're utilizing. Even the model is kind of dependent on this too. Different models along with different samplers will produce different things when it comes to steps, and that's definitely something you have to experiment with. Sometimes you'll get certain models and certain samplers that require less steps, and certain ones that require more steps. CFG is related to this idea of like how much the actual thing pays attention to what you're saying in the prompts versus what it just decides it wants to do. So if this value is lower, like a low number, it's like, hey, just be creative, do what the hell you want to do, AI. CFG, if it's higher, it's like it listens to you more intently. There's a caveat to that in the sense that when it listens to you more intently, it doesn't mix it with the other stuff really well, because that its creativity allows it to kind of blend together like all the properties of what it's doing a lot better. So it's not like you just take the CFG and make it as high as 1 because I want you to listen to everything I say. Yeah, well, that's not always as good as you might think it would be. The sampler, again, there's a bunch of different ones, and each one of them has their own little strengths, weaknesses. Some of them I don't even freaking use. Most of I think the people get accustomed to using is the DPM one and its different variations. The Hoon, I don't even know how to say that. That one and Euler are I think the biggest ones I see people use all the time. I think every once in a while you'll see these other ones being used, but for the most part, those are the big ones I think I see people using. So I would probably just start there. The scheduler is how this sampler is like kind of, I guess, interpreted. It's gradually, scheduler controls how the noise is gradually removed from the image. So again, that goes down to this step, which we'll talk about in a second. But normally for Euler, I use normal or DDIM, whatever, like this, these weird freaking names for everything, or simple. Usually it's between normal and simple. And for different ones like the DPM thing or whatever, usually I use something like either this one or this one, something like this, right? A lot of times I'll use like Karas for this one, but I almost never use Euler and Karas together. I almost never do that. And it's basically just, you'll see when you start utilizing like what seems to work a lot better. Because I think usually when I use Euler or Karas, there's a lot of digital artifacts that I freaking hate. But let's go back to normal. Not that one, normal. So this, again, is how it interprets how to take away noise from your image. But that, I think, is a really important part, again, that people don't go over, which is denoising. What is that? This is basically the entire process of how this AI thing works, is the noise thing or the denoising thing. And let me just briefly explain what this thing is. So when they created these things, when they built these AI models, right? They took a bunch of images, labeled them up, saying with, oh, this is a dog, this is a cat, blah, 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 right? This is a hat, right? And they labeled them up, and then they took that image and they gradually added noise to it until you couldn't tell what it is anymore, and it's just plain noise. And then they told the machine, now take that noise and do that in reverse. What we just showed you in the process of doing, taking this image and making it into noise, do that in reverse now. So, because the thing is, when you get to the point, this is the whole mysterious quantum entanglement type of thing that it's doing, is like when you get to this point where it's just a bunch of noise, then it's all kind of the same, despite the fact that it's not exactly the same, because the seed of the image is not, right? Unless it is, right? All right. So, because this is that idea of like the quantum entanglement thing, right? Is that if you start off with the same seed and then give pretty much all the same parameters and all the same type of prompts, and you denoise from that point of, taking that noise and go to that other point, in reality, you're gonna get something very similar on your end. That's what happens when you take other people's workflows and you get that freaking bottle with the galaxy in it, stuff like that. It's not exactly like the one that they showed you, but it's very similar. And it's based upon that aspect of like this quantum physics thing, right? And I think the main reason why it's never exactly the same is because no machine is exactly the same. But if you were to do it on that same machine as you produced before, you probably would get the same image. Maybe? I don't know. That's the freaking mystery part. That's the mystery box of this whole thing, and that makes it so strange, and it's weird that it's capable of doing that. Taking noise and turning it into an image. That's what denoising is. That's the basis of how all of this AI stuff in diffusion models is created. So that's it. This is all the brain of everything. Knowing how to utilize this, knowing what these things are, will help you manipulate and understand everything about producing an image. So let's just build the actual workflow, right? And I feel like it's really easy. I'm working with ComfyUI, as much as it's intimidating at first. Take a freaking point, a little marker, this little gold thing, right? Drag it out. And it gives you a selection of what you could choose. Now there's more than this, but these are probably the best ones that you could choose from. We're gonna choose empty latent image. This is how your noise starts. How tall is it? Blah, blah, blah. I like to switch this value to my favorite stuff. 1024 by 768. But we could just, let's just do this. Make it easier, I guess. No. I like my format. We're gonna keep with my format. And we'll make a batch size of 2 different images at once. So yeah, go from there. Negative and positive. This is prompts that are positive and prompts that are negative. That's basically what you do. But it's, again, you drag it out. There's different other things you could do with this, but let's just start with clip text encode, because that's the most important thing to really just understand what it is you're starting with and not getting into all this other crazy stuff. Negative, it's gonna do the same freaking thing. Clip text, no, not that. Drag it out, clip text encode again. Realize that basically when you connect it to the negative one, it negates everything you say in here. And again, this works for specifically for stable diffusion models, because that's how they work. But something like Flux, which you can still utilize in ComfyUI, this negative prompt doesn't mean anything because you can't negate those types of things. But that's a different tutorial, that's a different topic. Then we just drag this one out. All right, models. Let's just start with simply, we're not gonna load a LoRa, we're just gonna basic checkpoint models, right? And we'll just utilize deliberate since it's already popped up. And then again, color coding is real simple. Clip goes to clip. What does this clip stuff mean, right? It's basically just how the text is encoded. Like it's how you actually, how it interprets that along with the model to get what it is you're looking for. That's basically how you can think about that. Now you might notice that we have now a dot that's red, and we don't have anything to connect it to because nothing else is red. Now you can drag that out if you want, but you can also work the other side of this equation, which is this, drag out the latent image, and you'll see another selection. Now you can run it through another sampler if you wanted to. You can do this upscaling thing, which we'll talk about later, or we can just go to VAE decode, which is, hey, the name of this was VAE, right? Connect the dots. So what is VAE? VAE is basically like a variation, I forget what the A means, but it's a variation encoder of like how the denoising process works against your models or whatever. And usually what happens is, especially when they first did this, because this is like, deliberate thing is a stable 1.5 model, I believe, stable diffusion 1.5 model. So all this stuff came together. And some of the later stuff like Flux, you know, they separate these things. So there'll be like a totally different node here. So, you know, these individual windows are called nodes, by the way. But anyways, we got this. Now we can just go out here and drag this out. You can do either a preview image, which is sometimes what I like to do these days because I save so much stuff. And when you do a preview image, it doesn't save anything unless you tell it to. The save image automatically does. I'm gonna do the save image for the sake of, you know, showing you that process. But you know what? I'll do a preview image too. This is basically gonna produce the same output on each one of these. The only reason why I'm gonna show you this is because you can click on this, right? And this is important for people who are doing a lot of this stuff. I'll type in tutorials / beginners. All right. Basically, I created in the output folder, it's going to create another folder called tutorials, and then it'll label each image beginners 001 blah blah blah, right? That's what it'll do. So I encourage you to do that pretty much every time you're doing something new that's different, so that way you can organize your files. Because once you start producing a lot of stuff, which if you get like this stuff is pretty addictive, you're gonna find you're gonna have way too many files all the time. And when you're done with utilizing something, you can just delete that whole folder, and you don't have to go through and try to search for where your files are all the time, which is sometimes why I use preview image, which doesn't save anything except for in a temporary sense unless you tell it to save it. So basically this is it, right? Despite the fact that you don't need multiple one of these. And you know what, I'll just take this out just right now so it doesn't confuse people. You don't need anything right now else to produce an image. In fact, you don't even need to put a prompt in here. If you were to run it just like this, it would produce something, but it would be a bunch of junk. Who knows what the hell would pop up. But for the sake of the argument, let's just do that, right? Hit Q prompt. This is basically telling the thing to run. Once you hit this, it pretty much skipped over everything else because there's no need to do anything else. I think I ran this earlier today, and that's probably why it already had this thing loaded, actually. Because I think you could tell by the VRAM here. But when I press this, right? Yeah. It just produced a bunch of, I don't know what the hell this is. It's like, you know what it looks like? Crazy enough, it looks like an underpainting for painting. I'm an artist by trade, by the way, believe it or not. I actually am a fine artist, and I know there's a bunch of backlash in the artistic world about AI stuff, but you know, you can't stop the future, man, and it's a new medium. It's almost like it's trying to draw. It's like an iRobot thing or something. All right, so we have that. So let's just do this real quick. Let's make a prompt. Let's say, yeah, a cat wearing a blue hat. Oh, let's do that. Yeah. I'll try not to be model specific about stuff, but sometimes I'll have to be, because it might be important to do it too. A cat wearing a blue hat with white stars on it. Q prompt. And what I like about it is it doesn't really, it moves so fast sometimes. It didn't even show the green on the clip text encode stuff. But once if you don't change anything, like if I don't change this thing right here, it won't go back to that because it already have all that stuff loaded, and it's just do what you want it. So boom, we got a cat, we got 2 cats. So why does it give us 2 cats instead of freaking 1? I just asked for a cat, like I didn't ask for 2 cats. A lot of it mostly has to do with this stuff, how it was trained. So if it was trained on a bunch of models that were smaller than your actual size of the latent image, it's gonna create like duplicates of stuff a lot more. So there's a higher chance of it doing that. So it's kind of important sometimes to know how something was trained just for that specific reason. So we'll go back to the default, right? The default was 512. Run it again, right? And see what happens now. See if my theory is correct. Boom. See? Now you got 1 cat. A lot of times you're playing against yourself when you don't know how stuff works. Even though it's not as a little bit tiresome to try to figure out how stuff works all the time. Once you get it, then you'll realize, oh, this is a solution to that. And this is the main reason why I just wanted to run this, to really show you all these, like, this is how you understand how to utilize something. So, especially in Stable Diffusion, and it does work in Flux too. If you wanted 2 cats, it's best to just write a 2 next to it. Even with this A, I don't know if the A will even do anything. Because certain things with this, specifically the way how Stable Diffusion works, I don't think it understands that too much, but hey, sometimes it doesn't. And it also might be the size of the thing. Oh, I didn't put a plural there. That might help. I believe it does understand pluralization, but I haven't really used too much of I've been on Flux a lot lately. But there you go, yeah. 2 cats, right? Helps. The number next to it usually helps as far as this kind of Stable Diffusion thing. But again, it does work in Flux pretty well too. Let's get back to this part, right? Now you can see the number changed because we put it on randomize. And you know, if you put it on fixed, you put it on fixed, right? And don't change anything. It'll run one more time because remember, it generates it after the control thing. So it'll do it one more time. If I hit it now, it won't do anything. Why? Because everything's the same. You didn't change anything. If I change the text, even if it's just like take off on it. It said with white stars. Take off on it. You change something. So now it'll reset, but it's still on that same seed number. So that same starting point of denoise. That's why that's kind of important, or at least can be important. Put on randomize again. Now let's decrease the amount of steps. Let's say instead of 20, let's just go to the extreme. Let's say we only have 1 step. It'll be crazy freaking fast. But guess what? It didn't do what? It didn't denoise enough times. Because I didn't denoise enough times, that's what you're looking at. A bunch of noise. Where this whole thing really started from. Go up 5. What does that do, right? I'll press Control Enter, which is the same thing as doing Q prompt. So if you don't see me click Q prompt, that's what I'm doing. Press Control Enter. Boom. It's denoised a little bit, but you know, the cat's not all the way there. 5 isn't high enough. Let's go 10. Do it again. Boom. See, now we've got enough where we can see stuff, but you see it's still a little hazy in certain areas. So go back to 20. Guess what it'll do? You'll see more, right? Boom, you'll see more of that thing. Now it's like you can see the fur a little bit better. You could probably even go even higher than this. Let's go to 25. And of course, the more steps means like the more times it goes into this process of denoising. So the less or the more time it's going to take to do it. All right. Let's talk about the CFG a little bit. So let's put the CFG at 1. Be the most creative you can be, right? I'm gonna go back down to 20 because I don't want. I just want to decrease my steps to keep the time low. All right, now do whatever you want to do. Now it's got Well, what did it do? We said 2 cats wearing a blue hat with white stars. Well, it's got the blue hat. There's 2 cats looking type of things, but it's not that refined, right? It's not exactly the same. This is not even blue hats. That was what we had it before at 8 is where it showed up pretty damn good, right? So let's go with CFG at 20. Really high by comparison. So it's supposed to listen to me very, very precisely on this. And it starts to look a little bit stale now. It looks more cartoony, more granular. All this, what is all this? Ugh, right? It's not as, it looks more like a bitmap image. The higher I get with it, let's go with 30. It's not gonna take any longer really to do this. But it's just gonna look more and more stale like that the further you go. And then it's gonna look like a bunch of this, like where you're getting like clip art, or it might be maybe even look like sometimes it has like digital artifacts in it, and it's like that's not what you want. So it just listening to you all the way and you giving it free reign to do whatever the hell it want to do, it's never going to be like this. It's always going to be a balance, and this number will vary depending on what you're using. For instance, in Flux, this number is 1. You don't change it at all really in Flux. It just, I've never actually attempted to change. I'll do it maybe a video, like see what happens when you change the CFG to something other than that. But it doesn't really, it's not manipulated by this. It has its own little thing. But for the most part here, it's 8. But that number and these sets of numbers can change depending on if you change the sampler. All right, so we've been using Euler so far. Let's go to that one I was talking about before. DPMP, whatever, this freaking thing. I don't know why they name stuff so weirdly. All right, so let's just run it with the values we have already and see what happens. I don't think it'll be that bad even with these values. But you'll see it looks a bit different. It feels a bit different. Sometimes people like the way this looks a little bit more. So let's do this. Change this one to, let's change it to 30. Let's go like a little bit higher on the number of steps. It takes a little bit longer. Luckily, my system's okay. I don't have the fastest system in the world. Only like really high-end machines, people have stuff that like works a whole lot faster than this. But you can see, look at, you can see like the fur or whatever kind of pops up a little bit better. But I don't know, it's really a matter of preference on this. Now, if you take down this, the CFG, take it down to 6, because I believe what it is on this one is that higher steps with lower CFG has a tendency to create a better, more refined image for this particular sampler, if I remember correctly. And I see like this has a little bit more look of like realism. Now, granted, we can only go so far because we're doing 512 by 512, right? Your resolution size is still kind of dependent on your resolution size somewhat. But that's why you start to use different models other than just the very first Stable Diffusion. But basically, you can see like depending on what you manipulate using the CFG and the steps, you'll get a better image based upon the sampler you use. If you change it to Kara's, which is the scheduler, again, some of it's just a matter of preference, but it also will change the way it looks a little bit, the look and feel of it. And you see like this is more, you see it's more soft. You see this kind of realism to it. That's why, again, a lot of people I think like to use DPMPP2M together with Kara's, simply because it does that, especially if you're looking for photorealism. So let's talk about this last thing again, that denoising thing I'm talking about. Now, I think we've already demonstrated it, especially with the number of steps, what it's doing. But if you put this at, oh no, 1 is 100%. Sorry. If you put this at 0, 0 or 0, 1 or 4, right? You can run it as many times as you want to. But it's like you're saying, don't really denoise it at all, and you'll get stuff like this. Sometimes people will see if they put this at 0, right? I've seen people do this before, and they feel like, why is my image not showing up? Blah, blah, blah. Because you've got everything too low. You've got the denoise. You might have accidentally like cursor past this and did one of these things where you did this, where you just clicked on it and didn't realize it, and you manipulated where that number is. I've done that a few times, where the image doesn't show up and I'm trying to figure out why, and it's just because I've adjusted the denoise something. So check your parameters sometimes when you're getting like these blank images and stuff doesn't pop up. That's actually kind of cool, especially as an artist. It almost looks like watercolors, right? Without having to put a watercolor prompt in there. just by putting the denoise at 50%. And again, this will help when you're doing other stuff though, like inpainting. That's why you, at some point, you will need to manipulate this right there. You know, sometimes, or maybe if you just want to figure out what crazy stuff you can come up with simply by, you know, not keeping some of the noise in. And it's crazy how this one is at 75, but you can see the noise in the background right here. All right. But for the most part, when you're generating your first images, just keep it at 1, which is 100% denoise, and your full image will come out like that. So yeah, that's basically how you do this. That's how all this stuff works, and how to manipulate the very foundation of this thing to get the images you want utilizing ComfyUI. I hope this was very explanatory, was easy to understand. Please let me know in the comments if I didn't go over something correctly, or you know, like criticism. I'm okay with that. I'm not a freaking genius all the time. I'm just a genius some of the time, and a lot of times I do stupid stuff. But I'm wanting to make this like very like easy to just understand. That's the whole basis of this, and I will make more tutorial videos about stuff like prompting, about, you know, how to include LoRa's and all this kind of stuff like that. Very simply, a lot of them are going to be a lot shorter than this one, I think, because those things are pretty straightforward after you understand this thing. Once you understand this thing, this pretty much streamlines everything else you do, because everything else is basically in addition to utilizing this foundational aspect of creating AI imagery. But that's it. That's Arcane AI Cinema tutorials. Please do all that stuff that everybody says to do at the end of a video or the beginning or whatever, if you want to see more of this. Thank you, and have a great day.